Are you guys, or everybody zoomed?
Also,
Zoomed or phoned or whatever. Hi, John.
boom, John.
Okay.
Okay, Steve, let's get going here. Okay.
All right. So Doug or Edward, I guess Doug, start with you, and Edward and John, you can chime in.
I think yeah.
Quick high-level overview of the finances for December. Overall, with revenue, we're doing well.
Message is right. I'm wearing pants.
Someone go on mute. I hear some background. Just going to point out for our state grants fund for the month overall for the year to date, we're down $101,000. We budgeted for 435 students, 55 high cost students. Right now, we have enrolled and that we're invoicing is for 425 students and roughly 88 high cost students. As we continue the school year, that 101,000 will shrink, and we are estimating that we will probably end with a surplus about $100,000 for our per pupil. I'm gonna jump down to the contribution lines. That's the 4,300s. For the month of December, we are over $65,000. I noted last report that for Giving Tuesday, the funds will more or less in December, and that's what happened. Inside of that $65,000 overage, it's a $50,000 check from Maurice Shapiro. That's the grant that we've received for a number of years. It hits around this time. So again, that was $55,000. So year to date, we're over $22,000. And we at 107. Our budget amount is 170. I believe we're still on target to hit the 170 with some more donations that hopefully should be coming in. Any questions around revenue? Okay, silence is best. So we're going to jump down to the expenditures. If we take a quick look at the personnel line for the month of December, we're over $20,000. That just have to do with paying out some of our teachers with the grade team lead. It's just more of a timing thing where we do not budget that over the 12 or 10 and a half month period. We just budget. We don't budget for it like that. As it hit, we book it. I want to point out for where it says year to date, where it says that we are under $48,000. That's going to be $489,000. I've talked to the finance committee. Moving forward, we're going to tweak those numbers somewhat. Our teachers are 10 and a half month employees. We budget them over a 12-month period. When we get to the end of the school year, we pay our teachers, the end of the school year ends June 30th. Our teachers still get paid for July and the first pay period in August, and we accrue those numbers in June. So it's a little more transparent. We'll show more or less the actuals from the beginning of the school year towards whatever that month is that we would be in, so that they seem a little more transparent. As we drop down to our administrative expense, for the month of December, we're over $4,300. What that is for Christmas or for the holiday, we give out gift cards. So it's represented in that amount. That number's budgeted for a 12-month period, and then when it hits. So we don't just park it just for December. So it shows the overage, and as we go along the month, it's going to as we go along the school year, we'll flatten out. If we look at the year to date, we are actually under $22,000. A part of that has to do with us actually not being in the school. There has been some savings in certain areas, and this is one of them. So really, for the quick revenue and expenditures, that's a high-level overview. Before I jump to our balance sheet, anyone have any questions about any expenditures or revenues? Going once, going twice, sold. So we're going to jump to the balance sheet. Cash on hand for the month of December, that's $5.2 million. We have some other assets such as receivables. That's $117,000. We are invoicing the federal government for our title money. I don't know why it haven't come in yet. That's something I need to work with them and find out. Overall, we have good cash on hand. Total assets is 5.5. If we back out and just literally look at cash on hands, it's $5.2 million. I'm going to jump down to our current liabilities. As we can see, it's $2.6 million for the month of December. A good portion of that, which is, if my number is $1.3 million, that was a PPP funds. Until we actually get it given and forgiven to us, we're keeping it as a liability, but it is represented in our bank account. I would say in the coming few weeks, I think by the middle of February, we should have that application out to the federal government and really look to have this money forgiven. So that's it. So to talk a little bit more about the PPP, as you can see that the PPP is not keeping us afloat. We're doing well without those funds. So that's a positive. The money on books, on the books, we actually spent the money because we were supposed to use it for salary. So we used all the money in August and a portion of September. And that was money that we had budgeted for, and the PPP money worked out to be more of a surplus for us. And that's kind of a quick overview of both balance sheet and the budget versus actuals. Any questions, any concerns, any thoughts?
This is probably more for Steve, but maybe you guys in the committee have talked about it too. Any further sense of what our allocations are going to be like as the state cuts and so forth? Or are we still walking around in the dark here?
So we have some clarity. It's not complete, Doc. What we are learning is we believe there will be no cuts for this year, but we will be seeing a slight 2 to 3% cut for next year's funding. That's still in the works, but as of right now, no 20%, because that was something that we looked at, and that's what we was hearing, up to like a 20% cut on a low end, about 5, but nothing as of yet. And we halfway in the school year, so I believe we're going to stay, and they're focusing on next year. There's some more there's some more federal money coming out, I believe, for us. I think we was just awarded $49,000. I have to look into what it is. Our contractors that we use, CSBM, gave us a heads up, and so we're looking into that. So if there is a cut, that could also help. If not, then it counts more of a surplus in that area.
Thank you.
Is the cut even for 2 to 3% based on just hedging bets that we won't get as a state? We won't get the 15 billion that's estimated as being needed, or is it like, is there an insider info that we really won't get that as a state?
Honestly, I have no idea. No one really knows what's happening. They don't even know how to count the 2 to 3%. Is it the 2% or 3% from what we were slated to get? Because every year over year, we were getting an increase. So are we getting the cut from the increase? Are we getting the cut from where we're currently at? It's kind of just all up in the air. One thing that is being said, I think that is off the table, is that additional state aid funding that we was getting for the last, just charters only we're getting for the last, last 4 or 5 years. I think that's off the table.
Thank you, Doug.
Just some other observations. On the last audit, there were concerns about the use of credit cards. But Doug's saying that that's tightened up a lot, part of it because we're not buying as many things because people aren't in the classrooms.
Yes. So to on the credit card issues, we believe that this year we are going to be able to turn that that deficiency around and completely wipe it away. Again, a large portion of it is that we're not in the school and we're not using a lot of the, we're not ordering as much. Two, we've made some adjustments to who has cards and what they're using. And for accounting purposes, we always want to write checks anyway, because that's the easiest and proper way to catch all activities in a given time period, as well as, have more oversight over funds that are being used.
Okay, and then the other thing is that we're still running low enrollment. The gaps we more, again, as we know, made up by special ed. We need, if there are going to be cuts, the enrollments, particularly second grade, first grade, second grade, really important.
Yes,
so I'm not sure who's driving that, but we can't let up. Even though we're hitting budget, we can't let up on those items.
Correct. So the 425 that we budgeting, we budget 435, right? We have two programs, essentially. We have our pre-K program. We have 36 kids. That's a different dollar amount. So when I speak of the 425, that's just solely from K through 5. And we are still under budget, under enrolled by 10 kids. And each kid is roughly 16.5 almost. So that's $165,000 that we are missing from our budget. As you said, John, it is made up because of the over enrollment on our SPED students. But it would be nice if we hit the 435 plus the extra. That would set us up for any future events that could happen. But far as what we're doing right now for enrollment, Alejandro, which is our director of operation, I believe we started enrollment for next year early, which hopefully will have some effect this year. So the goal is to get out as early as possible and definitely hit the numbers for next year. And if you need to speak up, if there's anything I missed, Alejandro, just let me know.
Steve, you want to address John's question a little bit on a broader basis as far as just the enrollment?
I mean, not really, because I agree. Like there were years when we had full enrollment, and as the kids get older, as we know, it gets harder to, I guess, not only to enroll students to fill gaps, but also to serve them, because they often come farther behind. So it would be a shock to the system if we were to tomorrow fill like all 12 of those seats in X grade, for second grade. But it's been clear to us, for a long time since we've had, and these are the product of kindergarten vacancies from a couple of years ago that have just carried forward. That we have to do both. We have to fill any seats we have, over time, and we have to make sure that we have strong full kindergarten enrollment going into next year as well, so that we don't see these problems in the future.
And we're starting. Is the effort that's already begun? Is that a fairly broad-based effort, or is it how's it working?
What do you mean by that? For recruitment?
Yeah.
There's a whole plan. There's a lot going on. There are weekly meetings. We've got word of mouth campaigns. We've got some marketing in place. We've got some advertisements. We're using community partnerships to spread the word. So we're doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, and just to add, Voika, as the Outreach Committee's chair, she has placed a standing agenda item to look at the recruitment efforts and the data of the numbers of the kids. So we'll be looking at that on a monthly basis on a board level before it even comes to the board meeting.
Okay. Thanks, Doug.
Okay, and then the last thing that we discussed, which isn't being picked up in the budget, is after school. It looks like it's going to continue to grow. I mean, so far, because of where the kids not being in person, there have been some savings. But when you think about next year, I think trying to, and we think about the budgeting process, trying to get a handle on that sooner rather than later will be helpful. And I'm not sure who's driving that, but that'd be good to put in place over the next sort of 60 days so we can budget correctly for next year.
Yeah. And just to jump back into it, as we talked about on the finance committee, there is some savings for our after school program because we was outsourcing a portion of that program to another vendor. That was $75,000 that was slated. We haven't spent any of that. Our after school program in this current environment have grown and it's been pretty tremendous. And that's due to Ashley and her team. So what we're looking at, there's a possibility that some of that $75,000 will be pushed towards them as they would need to spend, again, as the program is growing. But we will be in the coming weeks starting to set up our budget for FY22, and that is a part of our focus as well.
Any more discussion of finances? Okay, Steve, why don't we go back? Go ahead, John.
I think things are just great shape. Obviously, earning no money on our reserves, and it would be nice to get the loan formally forgiven. But other than that, things continue to be in good shape. The guys do a nice job.
Yeah, yeah. And sorry, this is a jump right back in. We're going to be working with Gus. He got some information from one of our board members, John Barrett, to find out a way to put some of the money that we have to use that's just sitting in the CD to yield some more money. So in the coming weeks or months, we should have some more information about it so that we can present to the larger board. And hopefully the money that we make will, be enough to do some extra things for the school.
Yeah. Steve, you want to go back to the board minutes thing? I think we have.
Yeah, go ahead. Take it away, Pete. Let's
just as you've all seen the November board meeting. Excuse me. This is the December board minutes are on the agenda, and I move that we accept them. Any objections? There we go.
Do you have a quorum?
I believe we do.
We do. Yes, we do.
Okay. Just FYI,
Okay,
I admitted Ken, but he's gone now. I don't know if he's having technical difficulties, but I'm looking at the screen and I don't see him anymore.
At one time, we had a quorum.
I just checked my email. I don't see anything from him saying anything. So I wonder if it is a tech issue if he can't even email.
Yeah, well, it could be.
Well, hopefully that will be resolved. And Naheem emailed and said that he's running a little late. So we should have a quorum in a little bit.
Okay, so we can come back to that. All right, let's talk dashboard. Margaret, would you like to review it? I'll share my screen again so you can see it.
Oh, thank you. And I just clicked on, okay. So we just talked a lot about enrollment, but this is just, again, a snapshot for us as a group to be able to look at. So you can see what the breakdown is of each grade's enrollment. John highlighted some of our vacancies. We're currently at 464. However, we have 2 new admits, one being a returning student who moved back from Pennsylvania. So we're actually at 466 now. Our maximum enrollment size is 504. So we're not at the maximum, but as Doug pointed out, we're over the minimum, which is good. And you can also see, and this will be on the reports, the culminating and hopefully with all the initiatives, the growing number of applications that we'll have at each board meeting. And when we talk at the outreach committee, we're currently at 49 applications that we have right now. So again, we hope that number is definitely going to grow. And Alejandro can speak definitely much more about this, but there will be family surveys going out about students returning. We're hoping again to have high retention this year, so that our biggest efforts will be to fill any of the current vacancies that we have, and also, just like we do every year, pre-K and any K spots with pre-K students that do not return to Harlem Link, though we do have efforts to keep them from leaving as well. Are there any specific questions around enrollment or recruitment at this time that we have not covered? Silence. Okay.
So, I mean, Margaret, the only question I have is
yes.
on the recruitment and enrollment is, well, on enrollment is, are there just too many schools in the area, and should we just change our baseline for budgeting purposes?
That's a loaded question, John.
Yeah, I don't think so personally.
I mean, I just asking. I just want to be realistic, one way or the other.
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
No question about that.
I don't think it has a simple answer. I do lean towards Steve that we shouldn't, you know, we have a range that we're going for, a minimum and a maximum. Lowering standards outside of that, I'm not sure what, so you're implying decreasing our student population, or no? Can you say more about that?
Well, I think John's asking like, go ahead, John.
Yeah, if we're going to be sort of chronically under enrolled, should we reduce our budget estimates and change any sort of infrastructure and support that we have in the organization in order to reflect that we're just going to be a smaller school?
I think one of the things, this is now the second year pretty much of this same profile. And
Third.
Yeah.
Third year.
Well, okay, third year. I'd like to get out of the current mess that we're in, because John's got a salient point about the too many schools in the neighborhood thing, but I think this is such an unusual time that I'd be reluctant to mess around too much with the target numbers until we get back to normalcy, and if we ever do. And that's sort of my feel about that, but I'm glad to hear others talk about what they would believe to. But I think John's central point, which is when we get back to a regular operation, that if we're constantly running numbers that aren't realistic, we should change them.
If I can jump in.
Okay.
Hi, Boyka.
Hi, everyone. So we definitely can't just change numbers. That would definitely be something that would have to be authorized by SUNY, since it's a material change to the charter. But also, since the outreach committee is just starting up, and you know, we're working directly with the school staff to improve enrollment on a wider scale. I think that you know, lowering the numbers or lowering the expectation in the budget is maybe slightly premature. So one of the things that we are working on is expanding into District 3. And then at the same time, because we're citywide, we can also stretch into other districts. So I think what really needs to be done is a push on, you know, getting us set up for marketing the school properly before we would say, let's just give up and say we're never going to reach those schools. Because there are a lot of schools, but there are an enormous amount of families also. And with the redevelopment of Harlem and new housing, the amount of families has only increased. And we have just on 125th Street, which is not that far away, we do take in children from District 4, we have towers being built, 3 of them, where we may be able to pull families and you know, in from there as well. So I would say that it's time to lower the expectation for enrollment.
I think that's very salient, Boyka. And again, you're getting off the ground at a difficult time. but I'd really like to leverage your efforts before we decide that, you know, we have to modify anything.
Yeah, I mean, look, it'd be fantastic if we can full school up, particularly if you're looking at 2-3% cuts on a per capita basis, plus compensation increases for next year, plus after school. It'd be, I mean, that'd be a great way to be able to solve the gap. Okay.
I'm just going to say a few things about it, John. It's a great question, and I think we should move on unless anybody else other stuff to say.
Steve, I just wanted to add, I'm sorry, this is
go
Monica.
ahead. No, go ahead.
There was a report that came out today also that the DOE has seen a significant drop in enrollment this past year, of course, due to the pandemic and people moving away from the city. So I mean, I understand we need to get enrollment up, but I feel like when I saw their numbers, I'm like, oh, I immediately thought about tonight, and I'm like, well, we're not in such a bad position when we're looking at the drastic drop. And a lot of their drop was also in the lower grades, pre-K and kindergarten as well. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
I read that same article to give it further texture. I think the article said that there was a 4% drop, which is right now 43,000 children citywide.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I don't think that, I mean, you know, we need to think critically about this. Thankfully, I'm grateful to say that we haven't had a 4% drop in our student enrollment. So we're not matching what's happening in the DOE right now, as you pointed out. Steve, I'm sorry, what were you, sorry, I kind of hijacked, sorry.
That's okay. Well, one of the things I was going to say is that the city has seen a drop in enrollment, but that's happened before. It hasn't meant that we have had to adjust our enrollment. Like, we've been able to expand even in those times. And the district is seeing flight to charters. So like, we're one of those schools, and not much has changed in the charter landscape in the last 5 years. Like, since we've had enrollment problems, they feel more internal to our school than the market, because there aren't new charters. The charter explosion happened 10 years ago, not 5 years ago, at least in Harlem. And we've seen PS 185, for example, have continuous drop. They're down 17% in the last 2 years since the merger happened. So, and we've, in absolute numbers, we've increased. Like, we haven't done well against our targets, but we've kept expanding and kept adding more kids, even as we didn't meet the larger target. So I think it's a matter of adjusting our expectations upward and saying, no, we need to do better, and we can do better, and going all the way with some of these initiatives that the outreach committee is working on. So I agree with Boyka's observation, and Monica, what you said is one of the things I was going to say. Like, it is dipping everywhere, but 4% isn't, that's for our school, that's 20 kids. Yeah, and we're down 40 kids. So that doesn't explain us away. And we have, in theory, unlimited opportunity to market and to spread the word. And we are doing as much of that as we can. And we're working on it. It's getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to talk about attendance now?
Sure. Steve, can you put the shared screen back up? You took it off. Thank you. So this is our current attendance landscape since when we started at the end of August. We have an internal target. We did not change it for on-campus versus remote. We have internally 93% average attendance that we believe should be our baseline, and then as we work even farther up to 100%. So remote, we haven't reached, we have not reached in a school-wide average attendance of that. We have I think a couple of classrooms who have actually approximated that. I think one has actually reached 90%. So we're also trying to think about the student and family engagement that may be happening in some classrooms that we can really capitalize on and really think about as a school. But we did have a dip in December around the time of the holidays, but we are back up to an average percentage, which is around, well, right now it's 85.4%, but that is also still going up. But we're still shooting for 93%. And we're taking some lessons learned from our fall term 1 data. And we're thinking about some different avenues that we've already started to improve attendance even more and have more touch points with families.
And this is also going to be, we hope, positively affected by the outreach committee as well.
Right now, the outreach committee is not talking about attendance.
No, I understand it, but sort of the general ambiance of being a more outreach oriented operation, I think, can help that. Yes, no?
Sure. Yeah. Especially if kids are closer to school.
Yeah.
I mean, remote, they're all remote.
Yeah.
So none of them are close to school, sort of. But, even when we're on campus, and we know from our data that the farther a child is away from our school, and if they're in the Bronx and they don't have public transportation, like school bus transportation, those are that's the biggest pocket of our attendance concerns. But
I'll just add one thing about attendance, which is our big focus is on chronic absenteeism, which is not language we were using before, but it's part of the new round of the federal reauthorization of the individuals, whatever it's called, the old ESSA. It was originally called ESSA, then it was NCLB, now it's ESSA. Hold on, I got it wrong. ESSA is the new one, Every Student Succeeds Act. The original one was the ESEA, that was part of Johnson's Great Society stuff in the 60s. That is now requiring us to meet targets to be in like full good standing, and we've always been in good standing for 15 years under those that law's metrics. And we, even with poor attendance in light of that metric, we're still in good standing because our test scores were good enough. And the attendance metrics are like not in place right now because of the pandemic, they're suspended. But when they come back, we need to be at 14% chronic absenteeism. Last year, we were in the high 30s, to give you some context. So we know we can do better. We have peer schools that are doing better. We have peer schools who are doing worse. And pick up where we left off, which was, we were talking about attendance. I was going to add one more thing, which is chronic absenteeism. And we've got some initiatives that we're working on. So that's it.
Steve, you might, for the general group, define because that number's 41% sounds so astronomically high. What constitutes chronic absenteeism?
If you are absent for 10% or more of the school year, you're chronically absent. Okay. So if that translates to being absent 18 times or being absent more than 18 times in the school year. So it's basically twice a month. And we have a lot of kids. It's worse in the pandemic, but it was still high, but not as high as it is now before the pandemic. So we'll spend more time, as we have a little bit in the education committee and in board meetings in the future, talking through all the things we're doing. I wanted to move on to, next was the outreach committee. So Voika, we have here just like and I'll share it, just the basic outline of topics we covered at the last meeting. It was a lot. Maybe you can summarize. So it's on this top of this page in the board packet. Unless you'd like me to try to summarize.
Steve, you can go ahead and summarize.
So I think the big thing is creating an outreach plan for the whole school, but particularly for the board, that will involve bringing resources into the school and being out in the community more than we currently are in a thoughtful, purposeful, strategic fashion. The idea of the committee originally was to bring the school closer to the community and bring the community closer to the school. So this outreach plan will have a lot of different factors and will engage people at every level of the organization on it. I think that's the overall summary. We talked through in some detail some ideas around what that plan could look like and what elements of it will be as well as some things that are happening at the school that that relate to it. Family engagement, diversity and social justice work, and just the advancement work in the community. And as Margaret mentioned, talking about recruitment and enrollment all the time in all these meetings. And finally, the data needs. So we always want to use data, and we have a robust data program at the school. So using the resources we have to provide whatever information that this committee needs to plan well. So if I missed anything, please add others.
I think for me that's the biggest part of where we are right now is organizing the data and putting in and organizing a way for the data to be easily accessed so that we can streamline, sort of just like what John was asking, you know, what is the enrollment, what is the attendance, you know, what are things looking like? But I'm really happy with the school-based team and how they're getting organized too and sharing their data with the committee. So that's been really helpful in getting a good picture of what's going on with the school in general, so that the outreach is, you know, for me, it's not just based on one specific area, it's all encompassing. So it's beginning to shape up, which I'm really happy with.
Voika, this is a terrible time to have asked you to do this particular job. And I know you're in the formation stage mostly now, but do you foresee things you can do under the present circumstances that can effectively outreach, even though you're not seeing people on the street and you're not seeing them in the school?
So I have been communicating with Alejandro, as well as some of the other committee members have been you know, the core group crossing over into what the school is doing, so that we are aware and can give advice and push initiatives that, you know, make the outreach wider. So I think the focus right now has been on enrollment and outreach in that way. But yeah, are there things that we can do, you know, just in terms of like getting our presence out there? Absolutely. But I think we need to put together a little bit more of a cohesive, like, kind of marketing plan. And the other thing that the committee spoke about was like, what is the message? What is the, you know, unifying message that we want to get out there? And so that work will start up soon.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else? Okay, next item is the just discussion points from the Education Committee. Margaret, do you want to hit those? And then I guess Brandy and Laura and others can chime in.
Sure. So the Education Committee met last week, and we spent some reflective time talking about the events on the Capitol and, you know, what the impact was of that, and thinking about it in terms of locally and how it affects our students and how it is affecting us, like how we were talking about it. So that was an impactful conversation. Just really thinking about, you know, also just, and it's making me think about, you know, what is the care for our students, especially the older they get and the more awareness that they have and what they're hearing at home when we're seeing events, and the harm that is particularly evident when there are punitive measures that are very different for people of color and for white rioters during that time. And then we transitioned and we talked about the actual school's status on reopening and on-campus learning. And I think, you know, what the bulk of the conversation is that, you know, we want to reopen. The CDC at this point says, you know, schools need to reopen. I don't think that anyone disagrees about that. But there's also a caveat in terms of how that is safe. And the safety really hinges on the federal resources that are needed. So you know, and one of those biggest things is resources to testing, and that's something that we're actively working on. The DOE is not giving us any testing at all, so that will be to our own device in terms of what that would look like so that we can reopen. Once we reopen, we would start again with the childcare and work our way to hybrid as it's safe, and it also seems like it would be much more consistent because of the numbers. I can't remember if we actually looked at the map or if we just talked about the map of the closures around the city because of positive cases within schools. It was red dots and blue dots. Red dots were closures, and it was just, I mean, it was like a horror show in terms of just the vast numbers of hundreds of schools that are closed and reopening, and that doesn't provide a consistency because of our co-located status. If we had our own building and we could control and mitigate what the positive cases are and how we're taking all of the safety measures, that's one thing, but we're at the mercy right now of with the mayor at this point and what the closures are. The other conversation that we had was around vaccinations, and we are putting the word out very steadily to staff with resources for staff in terms of where they can sign up for vaccinations. We've provided everybody with proof of employment at a school so that if they need it as an educator. Steve and I were just vaccinated with our first dose yesterday, and they asked for nothing, but we made sure that people have what they need, and the vaccinations are not mandated. So, you know, we are not even asking at this point who has not chosen to get a vaccination. We're making sure that any personal time off for vaccinations, we support staff in what their needs are, because for any of us on this call who are trying to schedule, you're trying to schedule your own vaccinations, it is not easy, and you take what you can get in terms of a time slot. Are there any questions about anything that I've just talked about before I mention any of the other things that we spoke about? There are a few other things. Everyone good? Okay. The other thing that we spoke about was state testing. And I think that our straight answer will be the bitter end in terms of definitive cancellation. That, you know, we're always looking out for that email of the definitive cancellation of state tests. Or we'll see it on Chalkbeat or something before we actually see it on the email. But right now, as it stands, there is an update in terms of the state has officially requested a waiver to the feds that we suspend state testing in New York State for this year. And again, in terms of, you know, following this and thinking about the waiver, we don't know what the feds will say in terms of the Biden administration, in terms of where they stand on that. The new education secretary is pro-state testing in general. When he was still superintendent of Connecticut, he was not moving to ask for a waiver. So it's unclear about what their stance will be. I do think that New York would be able to suspend the state tests, but I think it's a funding game in terms of, I think that the state would lose out on some funding streams if they did not have the state test administered. And it's a no-brainer to us as to why they would request this waiver. There is gross inequity if we cannot all be on site to have these tests. They certainly should not be administered remotely. The state does not believe that either. And it's just right now it's just not safe. A lot of families would not even feel safe coming back on campus to have a test like this administered to their children. Are there any questions about that? Okay. So we also, we talked about just how we're collecting data at the school. And there is a lot going on with data collection. K through 5 are having consistent ELA and math units tests that are given remotely. And in terms of Aviva and Dan working with their teams, it is really inspiring to see just how reflective all teams have been in terms of what testing administration can look like remotely. In terms of, when you think about the much younger children, like kindergartners and first graders, how long they would actually be able to sit and take a test, what does the format of the test look like remotely so that they can access it, and being in smaller breakout groups to support kids with having a smaller setting at the time that they're taking these assessments. Aviva, I know that you were on the call. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Hi. No, the only thing I'd add is that, the teachers are working so hard to really get a good gauge on how children are performing across math and ELA. And from the lower grade side, as Margaret expressed, we're really trying to, think creatively about and developmentally about like what materials do students have access to while taking certain exams, because in the classroom they would have these resources up or they'd have this material in front of them, and being thoughtful about the time and space, and also thinking about our multi-language learners and students with special education, and thinking about extended time and how does that look like in virtual. So we really are trying to do that, and we're staying on top of the data in pretty quick ways. Like, you take a math test in first grade last Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and like tomorrow we're doing the data analysis. So we're really trying to keep up with all of the data so that teachers have at their fingertips like next steps to work on with their children, and also families are informed, depending on the class, like making sure that, because now, truly more than ever, families are part of the dialogue and checking in on how their children are performing on all of the tests and different assessments that they're taking. So we're trying to strike that balance of, assessing to get as much data as we need and not over assessing, while also, trying to be responsive to that data across grades.
Are there any questions? Any comments? Thanks, Aviva. And in terms of our accountability data, this is, of course, this year, well, since last March, very unusual year. In terms of what our accountability benchmarks are actually, how that's going to shake out. We're probably not going to have a state test. That's a cornerstone of our accountability. We have our reading benchmark assessment, and we have, we typically have a math interim assessment. Because there's been such an interruption in terms of how we can assess that, we're going to be working with you as a board as well as SUNY on how we're presenting any accountability data. We did in the fall have our first, not kindergarten, but first, because we wait until January, but 1st through 5th had their first reading assessment benchmark, which was very carefully orchestrated in terms of how kids would be pulled into small breakout rooms and to be able to read with teachers. The APs worked really hard to set up an army of assessors so that, it's classroom teachers, but it's also our academic intervention specialists and our coaches, and to really make sure that we had a cadre of staff members who could step up and do this so that we could have timely data. But also that the assessment windows just wouldn't drag on indefinitely. So in terms of our ELA benchmarks, we've also shifted to something that we've called pandemic benchmark levels that we've talked about, I think at the last board meeting, but we have talked about it for a couple of cycles of committee meetings with the education committee. The pandemic benchmark levels are an intermediary step to our internal benchmarks. And it was trying to accommodate how to think about levels with anticipated learning loss because of this pandemic, and how teachers can actually use that as a teaching tool. The pandemic benchmark levels are higher than our SUNY accountability levels. So if a child can meet the pandemic levels, they're actually meeting the SUNY benchmark. We internally have much more aggressive benchmarks that we want our kids to reach towards. But we do, you know, we do have mixed results on our first ones. We don't have 100% of our kids who have met that benchmark yet. And we're now really digging into how our students performed, especially our cohort of 2+ years. And we're looking at targeted intervention and progress monitoring to make sure that they're on track for the end of the year to meet the pandemic benchmarks. And Steve and Aviva, I don't know, would you like to say anything more about that? Do you have any nuance that I did not cover?
Margaret, one question, if I might. The pandemic benchmarks are ours or those SUNY's?
They are ours.
Okay.
They're still higher than SUNY's, but they're ours.
That's what I understood you to say. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I think you covered it at the highlights.
And anyone from the Ed Committee who's on the call, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
I just, this is Laura. I just really just wanted to, again, commend the staff. Even remotely, you've continued to provide a really robust data-driven instructional program. And so, you know, kudos to all of you.
I'll second that.
I'd be remiss in not shouting out our data management team too. It's been, I wish that we had what we have in place now when we first opened the school in our early years. I think it could have been so helpful to have data turn around like this.
It's really remarkable.
Okay, I'm going to, let's see, we've reviewed the outreach committee. What is next? Is it development?
The last thing is a quick development update, just kind of a coda to Giving Tuesday, and another extended shout out to Josh and the team and the board members who stepped up, because we blew away our targets and had a terrific time. So Josh, did you want to add anything in reflecting on Giving Tuesday?
No, it was everyone who rallied together. Thank you very much. This is the most we've ever made on Giving Tuesday. We are, when the matches come in, we'll have exceeded 70,000, which is 30 more than we set as our goal. So it was really cool to see everyone come together as a community. So everyone who is engaged, thank you very much. And let's break another record next year.
Right on.
Yeah, and under Ken's leadership for the 2021 year, we're focusing on major gifts. So we started that strategic work now in thinking through some people who are close with board members and other people who are close with the school who you know, we've been in touch with, but now we can start being strategic about making a big ask at some point and cultivating based on what their interests are. So that's pretty exciting stuff, because you know, we have a lot of things in place to be able to go ahead and do that and make those asks. I'm not sure if Ken is on the call at this point. You may have had him and lost him. Pete, did you want to just run that vote one more time now that we officially have a quorum?
Do we have a quorum?
We do, yes.
I move that we accept the minutes for the December meeting as they're shown on the agenda. Does anyone object? I think we can thus say we have accepted the minutes.
Okay, anything else from anybody? Any last questions, comments?
I don't really know how you guys are still doing this, but it's amazing. It's the most, nobody was trained to do this. And you've done a great, everybody at every level has done a great job of stepping in and revising their lives and getting the kids educated. Thanks, Pete. It's truly been a real team effort across the board. And, you know, Margaret said it, you know, it's really inspiring to watch the APs work, but they're carrying they feel like, I think, the Atlas, you know, role where the school's on their shoulders, and they designed a very ambitious program for this year, and they're following through with it. So it's really impressive. And I have one other question. John Reddick, did you get the shot?
Not yet, Pete. Not yet.
Get it, baby.
I got it.
What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?
I have to go on vacation when I come back.
Okay.
No, you're supposed to get it before you go on vacation.
No, I mean, start the clock. Just start. Yeah, start the clock now, John.
Yes.
First things first. First he gets the sun, then he gets the shot.
Yes.
Anybody have anything else? Please take note of the scheduled meetings and so forth at the bottom of the agenda, so we're all on the same page. And Steve, you have any parting words?
I think so. Have a great night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank everybody for coming, and stay in touch.
All right.
Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye.
Good night.